So I am 22 years old. I don't have much knowledge about finances and stuff as I still live at home as I'm at university. I do however pay my parents about £300 a month rent, I pay my own phone plan, buy material stuff I want or need, pay out for other services like for music or whatever, and try to put as much as I can in savings whilst still keeping enough in my main account for day-to-day purchases. Currently, I am saving up for driving lessons and hope that if I pass decently, I can use some of my savings towards getting a car. I'm in my final year of uni, so I'll be done and able to work full-time when all this happens. I also decided to get a credit card so I can learn how to manage credit wisely and build some up. My credit score is good for someone of my age and circumstance, but obviously it's nothing great in comparison for other stuff. I should point out that at most I only plan on using this card with a total adding up to £100. I've stuck to that so far and only actually used it twice, with these purchases only adding up to £80, and I paid it off quickly. I do not plan on exceeding my limit anytime soon, as I've heard far too many horror stories of people just using their credit card too much cause it was handy and getting into debt. The only people I disclosed this to was my dad, as my mom has the tendency to blab to my brother and sister-in-law, both 28. She happened to overhear us talking one day, and before I knew it, my brother and sister-in-law got wind and asked me if they could use it. They both admitted they had debt spurred on by excessive credit card use and thought that since I basically had nothing owed on mine, it was free money. I told them quite politely that I was really uncomfortable with that idea and that I would owe the money and I can't magic up that kind of money. Things went quiet until a few days later they both turned up at the house. They were nice to start with, but basically started demanding I let them use the card, and they tried to manipulate my mother into guilting me into doing it. I got really angry, and when my brother said I owe it to them because they used to babysit me up until a couple of years ago, I laughed in their faces and walked out. When I came home, I learned they tried to manipulate my dad and he kicked them both out. My mother then tried and he told her to go too, and she is currently staying with my brother and Sil. The only person on my side is my dad, who tells me they're all trying to take me for a ride and they're trying to manipulate me cause I'm young and they think I'm vulnerable. My brother, sister-in-law and mom on the other hand think it isn't a big deal letting someone else use my card. It's really messing with my head, and I just want everyone to stop being in an argument. I sustained very bad injuries to my face this month. I'm in the stage of healing when the scar tissue has formed, but it's still very tender new skin. I'm going to have very obvious facial scarring for the rest of my life. The injury starts about an inch above my hairline, goes down over my brow so that on part, hair will not grow. It continues down my cheek where it is deepest. I'll always probably have an indentation in the fullest part of my cheek. Then it continues to my jawline. In some ways it's okay. I'm happy it's just cosmetic damage. My friends are super reassuring, telling me how badass and sick it's gonna look. They say I'm still as hot as ever, now a little more sexy and mysterious. But in some ways it really sucks. I know that I'm always gonna be seen first as the girl with a scar. And it feels especially bad when people look at me differently. This week, I had to fly home for a family thing. It was a plan I'd made long before my injury. I wasn't really looking forward to the pity or people making a big deal of it. I'd rather it not be acknowledged. I'd also met with my dermatologist, who said that I was at the stage of scar tissue formation, that I no longer should be dressing the wounds. The skin was healing, and instead I needed to be applying topical cream and Vaseline to keep the site clean and moist. It also looks a bit ugly. The building scar tissue is very red and tender, and with the Vaseline over it, looks slick and shiny. So I get on this flight, I have the window seat and I put on my headphones and drift off to sleep when the plane is still boarding. I wake up to this kid, maybe 4 years old, sat next to me, throwing a tantrum. I didn't catch the first part of it and I honestly couldn't understand what he was yelling about. His father said to me, "Can you cover that injury?" I said that my dermatologist recommends I don't, so no, I don't think I will. He started snapping at me saying, "There is no need to be so rude. That injury is graphic and it's scaring my little one." I said, "This is my face. The only damn face I've got. It sucks being told I'm so ugly I can't show my goddamn face in public." He started to backtrack saying, "Just until it's healed," and I said, "It'll always be with me. Maybe teach some." Compassion and respect instead of telling a girl half your damn age what you think about her face. That's rude. He actually got up after that and I think went to a stewardess about a seat change because a young couple came to sit next to me on a few minutes instead. I've gotta admit I felt so low that I put on my sunglasses and had a quiet cry for a few minutes. Since my wife and I got married 3 years ago, things have been off. I know that people grow and change with time, but around our wedding, my wife changed drastically. She bleached her dark brown hair blonde right before the ceremony. And I honestly thought I was in the wrong church for a split second when she came down the aisle. We moved into our house right after the honeymoon, and she went into full domestic mode. We'd shared cleaning duties before, but once we moved into the house, she became insistent on doing everything before I could even get to it. Since this is our first house, I thought it was some kind of homeowner nesting thing, but it never stopped. Her hair color is none of my business and I think most people would be happy not to have to clean. So I honestly didn't really think much of either of those things at the time. The big thing has always been how closed off she got after the wedding. When we were dating, she'd tell me long rambling stories about her feelings and rant to me when she was upset and all that. And I liked hearing about what was going on inside her head. After the wedding, that stopped pretty abruptly. If I ask her how her day is, she will only ever tell me that it was fine or super. She doesn't talk to me about her feelings anymore, ever, even when I explicitly ask, "How do you feel about X?" She also stopped telling me about anything important that happened to her. About a year after we got married, her grandfather died. Did she tell me she'd lost her grandfather? No. She told me that she had to go to a conference for work on the other side of the country, which I thought nothing of. On the second day she was gone. Her older brother texted me to tell me that my in-laws had really missed seeing me at the funeral. When I called her to ask why in the ever-loving hell she didn't tell me, and then lied about it, all she would say was, "I didn't want to trouble you. You have a lot on your plate." After that, she went on a couple of spontaneous family trips. She's really close to her family, so the first time she said she was going camping with her brother at their alma mater. I didn't think a lot of it other than to be slightly disappointed and confused that I wasn't invited. Because her brother's cool and the three of us go camping together a lot. But the second time, I started hearing alarm bells. I'd like to say I'm a more secure man, but after the second spontaneous family trip, my wheels started spinning and I started to think that maybe she was cheating. This was a weird insecurity in the back of my mind for a while, since she wasn't showing any other big signs of cheating. She wasn't guarded about her phone and hadn't changed her routine / appearance. A few weeks ago, she told me she was pregnant. I was over the moon about it until I asked her how many weeks along she was, and she nonchalantly said about 12 or 13. She'd been pregnant for like 3 months before she even bothered to tell me. She's not really showing at all, and she doesn't usually drink, so I had been completely in the bloody dark. I honestly hadn't even suspected. That was kind of it for me. I was sure she was cheating, and that it wasn't my kid. I thought there was no possible way that a woman would keep her pregnancy a secret from her husband for 3 months. So I snooped. Yes, I know I was wrong, but I wanted proof that she'd been having an affair before I moved out. One of my best buddies from college is a divorce attorney, and when I asked him what I should do, he sent me the info for a key logger. I installed it on my wife's laptop and was prepared for the worst. Now, I feel like what I found is somehow worse than her cheating. I didn't find any steamy messages, but I found out that she keeps a diary in a Word document that she writes in every day. I know I should have just stopped once I knew she wasn't cheating, but once I saw my name in her diary, I couldn't stop. I read all of it. All 7 separate documents, going back to way before we'd even met. Turns out she's not cheating. She's depressed, hates herself, and has absolutely no trust in me. All of the stuff I've been confused and bothered by has some kind of sad, self-loathing explanation. She hates having blonde hair, but she writes, "I know he'd divorce me if I went back to being a brunette." Because wives are supposed to be blonde almost every week. The "wives are supposed to be" thing is tangled up in everything. She thinks wives are supposed to be quiet, which is why she doesn't talk to me anymore. She thinks wives are supposed to make things easier for their husbands, not harder. Which is why she didn't tell me when her grandfather died. It just goes on and on and on. She didn't tell me when she got a huge promotion and a raise because he'd leave me in a heartbeat if he knew I made more money than he does. Men can't handle that. It hurt to know that she thinks of me as some kind of one-dimensional 1950s husband. And I've been racking my brain to think of anything I could have done to make her think this way. What I can't handle is that she'd lied about the big stuff. I honestly don't know if I can forgive her for not telling me about the miscarriages. The spontaneous family trips were actually her miscarrying 2 of our children, one at 5 weeks, the other at about 10. She went and stayed with her parents while she was recuperating, and her brother and sister came to support her. But not me. I didn't get to be there for her, because she thinks I would leave her immediately if I knew that she'd killed our children. She's convinced that she caused both miscarriages because she smoked pot for a long time before we got married. For what it's worth, it sounds like her family tried both times to get her to tell me, but she wouldn't. She finally told me about this pregnancy because her parents threatened to tell me she didn't. I'm just absolutely confused. I don't even know what to think right now. I'm just so baffled because everything she says about me in her diary is insanely nice. She goes on for pages and pages about how much she loves me and how she thinks I'm her soulmate and how she would do anything for me. I just can't understand why she thinks that I would leave her. Knowing that she's spent the last 3 years walking on eggshells around me, convinced that I would leave her at the drop of a hat is just so confusing and awful. I feel like our marriage is some kind of lie. The woman I thought was self-confident and ready to take on the world is actually full of self-loathing and really, really depressed. I don't know her at all. She's been suffering silently with depression long before we met. She has no faith in me, no trust. She thinks that every hug and kiss I give her and every "I love you" I say is a lie. I just don't know what to do. She obviously needs serious help, but I don't know how to get it for her. I can't tell her that I read her diary. If she has zero trust in me now, I can't even imagine what she'd think if she knew if I read 6 years worth of her private thoughts. I feel like I need to get my in-laws on board somehow, but I don't know what to say to them. I know I can't ignore this, but I feel like any move is the wrong move. My wife, Irene, is very fit. She likes working out and has a proper exercise regime, etc. She believes that if she feels good, she looks good, and she feels good working out, so who am I to stop her? My brother, Will, spent the latter half of last year going through a messy divorce and now needs a place to stay. Though my brother and I aren't very close, I figured he would only stay with us for a couple weeks until he got back on his feet. Will is a typical gym rat. He's always on a very strict diet, always working out and bragging about his gains. I've worked out with him a few times and he's a little obnoxious. He's always mad at you if you don't work at his pace and is always trying to correct your form. He's a pretty fit and muscular guy, but I don't like to exercise with him. Will has been pushing Irene to work out with him because, according to him, she won't be able to keep up with him. Irene mostly just shrugs him off with a laugh and tells him she would love to work out with him. Irene works out in the mornings, 3 times a week, and then does a run in the evening. But she's been busy this past week and hasn't been able to stick to her usual schedule. Will thinks that she's making excuses because she doesn't want to be embarrassed by him. Again, Irene just laughs him off. About 2 days ago, Irene and Will went on an early morning run. I didn't go with them, but the first thing I heard when Will entered the house was, "The only reason I couldn't keep up with you, Irene, is because you were sweating too much." I found this extremely comical, and kinda just laughed him off. Irene rolled her eyes and went to take a shower, so I thought that the conversation would die. However, Will just kept bringing up my wife's sweat. My wife went to work and he told her to make sure she doesn't sweat through her clothes, or when she called me in the middle of day. He yelled, "Tell the sweaty." I said hi. Of course, the comment aggravated me and I told him to knock it off and stop acting like a child. I thought that was the end of it, but he just kept going. By the end of the day, I was tired of his comments, but Irene seemed rather unfazed by them. When she served him food, he made a comment about her sweating into the food. At this point, I was at my wit's end and I told him to stop acting like a sore, slow, referring to his running pace, loser, and eat his food. Will, of course, got angry and said the only reason he was going slower than usual was because he was distracted by my wife's unhygienic sweat. Irene looked a bit offended by this, and I told Will that I would kick him out if he made another comment like that. He's been super pissed ever since. I jokingly told this story to a mutual friend and they agreed with Will. Maybe I shouldn't be so harsh. I didn't expect this amount of responses. I've decided to kick him out. He will be staying at a nearby hotel now.